Hi there, dazzling third graders. You've probably seen this site 1,000 times. Looks pretty familiar, right?
You've probably been to Giordane's, Nick's Pizzeria, and maybe the Irvington Town Hall Theater. And then everyone's favorite, Brazar's frozen yogurt at the bottom of the hill, right?
Hi, my name is Hudson.
And my name is Caitlin.
And we're 5th graders at Main Street School. We're going to be your tour guides for this video, and we're going to introduce you to some of the most important places that you'll need to know before you go to this big building on Main Street. Most of you probably know my friend Rip here, but do you know who created him as a character and why he's important?
That's right. Rip Van Winkle was created by the author Washington Irving, who lived in what was at the time called Dearman, and then later changed to Irvington to honor him. That brings us to one of the main topics of this video, the history behind our town. Does anyone know the name and location of Washington Irving's home in Irvington?
Very good. It is indeed Sunnyside. That's located here on Sunnyside Lane. What you may not know is that Sunnyside is actually located in Terrytown, but that's a story for another day. Speaking of stories in history, I am now joined by a historian who grew up in Irvington. He's here to tell you why the study of history is important. Hi, Professor Maher. Welcome to our documentary. My name is Hudson, and I'm a 5th grader at Main Street School. We're making a documentary for incoming 4th graders to get them ready for life on Main Street. Could you please tell them a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in history?
So Mr. Oley was this amazing history teacher who taught us that history was all around us. It was everywhere. Here at Sunnyside, this is the home of the famous American writer Washington Irving. He wrote incredible stories like Rip Van Winkle and the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. He built this amazing home 150 years ago in 1835, and our town is actually named after him. But Mr. Oley also showed us that history was even in places that was unexpected, like up behind the reservoir, up in the woods. Do any of you know who's buried up there? Up there's the grave of a man named Johann Stolting. They called him the Hermit, and he lived in Irvington 150 years ago, same time as Washington Irving. He made buttons out of wood and sold them in towns. He was a really interesting guy. He wore his own clothes that he made. He always wore sandals, even in the winter. He never wore a hat. And he even had a coffin made that he slept in until the day he died in 1888. And then they buried him in that coffin right next to the small cabin where he lived up behind the reservoir. Now, when you go to the Main Street School and you go out on recess some days, I want you to remember that history is also right under your feet, because in the parking lot of the Main Street School, underneath the ground, is part of the Croton Aqueduct, a giant tunnel that brings water from northern Westchester, north of us, down to New York City. New York City needed clean water, and this big tunnel brought the water down. It was built in 1837, around the same time that Washington Irving lived here, and the same time that the Hermit lived here as well. So just think of that history under your feet when you're out playing at Main Street School. So it's really no surprise that I became an historian, living here in Irvington with history all around me my whole life. But history is really important to study in school too. I want you to take a few minutes now and discuss with your teachers why history might be important to study in the Main Street School. And when I come back, we'll see if your answers match mine. So the question is, why should we study history? Welcome back. I hope you had a good discussion. Here are my 2 reasons for studying history. First, history can help us avoid mistakes made in the past. Just imagine if those New Yorkers hadn't built the aqueduct, if they hadn't gone up north, preserved those lakes, and carried that water in those big tunnels down to New York City. We'd have no healthy drinking water. That would have been a big mistake. We learned from that. We can learn from that today. But secondly, history can teach us how to live better lives today. The story of the hermit and Washington Irving can teach us good things about living today. Remember, Washington Irving was a very different person than the hermit. He lived in this beautiful house, Sunnyside. The hermit lived in a small cabin up in the woods. But we should remember that they both should be treated similarly, even though they were different. Boys, girls, young, old, rich, poor, we can learn from history that if we treat people equally, it'll make our lives much better.
Thank you, Professor Maher. That made a lot of sense to me as why we need to study history.
Thanks a lot, Hudson. And thank you, third graders, and good luck as you head over to Main Street.
Now let's bring the focus closer to home. How many of you recognize this building? And how many of you have been inside it? You're right. It's the Irvington Historical Society, located near the top of Main Street and close by the Main Street School. Let's take a walk inside. Hi, Mrs. Ryan. My name is Caitlin, and I'm the narrator of a documentary being made about the importance of history, and specifically the importance of Irvington history. Would you happen to have a few moments to talk about the Irvington Historical Society?
Sure, Caitlin. I do have a few minutes, and I'd like nothing better than to talk to you and your third grade audience about the Irvington Historical Society.
That's great. When was this building built, and who built it?
This building is called the McVicker House because it was built in 1853 by the Reverend John McVicker for his son William. William was the rector of St. Barnabas Church, and he lived here. He was a friend of Washington Irving.
Good stuff. What was the oldest building on Main Street?
That would be the Dearman Farmhouse, right across the street. That was built in 1812.
How did this become the home of the Irvington Historical Society?
Good question, Caitlin. At some point, the church no longer needed the building, and so over the years, other families lived here. In 1957, Con Edison bought the building and built a substation in the rear, and the house itself became a doctor's office. It stayed that way for a number of years, but then in 2002, it became abandoned and deteriorated over the years. 10 years later, the village bought it for $1. And then it became the home of the Historical Society in 2005. Now it's listed on the National Register of Historic Places.
Nice. I can't imagine that there have been too many houses selling for $1 recently.
Very true. The great news is that many folks in Irvington came together to renovate the old building and turned it into the gem it is today. A perfect example of what Professor Maher spoke about earlier, about history and how important it is to preserve it. As you can see, we have all kinds of exhibits with maps, clothes, documents, artifacts, timelines, and so on. We also have a children's center downstairs. Many thanks for the visit, Caitlin. I hope you third graders come to visit us in the very near future. We have all sorts of exhibits about the history of Irvington, and learning more about the village you live in makes you appreciate the people who lived here before you. We have a very special exhibit going on right now. It's our 10-year anniversary, and all of these different parts of the exhibit tell about the village and this house and how we continue to make history. And besides, you'll be neighbors when you arrive as fourth graders at Main Street School. Good luck.
You guys are gonna love this place, and look how close it is to Main Street School. That's where I go to school, and that's where you'll be next year. Let's see if the principal's around. Hi, Miss Chapnick. Do you happen to have a few minutes to talk about Main Street School to next year's fourth graders?
Sure, more than happy to talk about Main Street School to our future All-Stars from Dow's Lane, but since you have already toured the building, how about I tell you a little bit about this amazing building you will be in next year?
Perfect. When was this building constructed?
Main Street School was dedicated on March 31st, 1913, and it replaced a smaller school building on Ferris Street, where the gymnasium now stands. At one time, it housed almost all of the village's students, kindergarten through high school. Its first senior class had 8 girls and 1 boy. With the building of the new high school and the opening of Dow's Lane in 1956, this building became middle school, serving grades 6 through 8. It had 8 girls and 1 boy.
What can next year's 4th graders look forward to here at Main Street School?
Good question, Caitlin. And once I've given my answer, I'd love to hear yours, since you've been here for 2 years. The Main Street School is an awesome place for students. We have terrific teachers, friendly staff members, and all kinds of amazing programs, clubs, and field trips, including Immigration Day, Project Lead the Way, Garden Club, Destination Imagination, trips to Stone Barns and the United Nations, and so much more. We have this incredible building, which has all kinds of history. You can almost hear the walls and rooms talking about former students and events from the past 100 years. We're on the aqueduct, and as you've seen, near the Historical Society.
To tell you the truth, I agree with everything you said, but you left out a big part of Main Street School.
Really? What's that?
Being on Main Street, where all the action is.
Well, look who's here. Do any of you 3rd graders know who this man is? I was hoping that at least some of you know that this is none other than the mayor of Irvington, Mr. Brian Smith.
Good afternoon. What brings you here today? Are you proposing a new spot for a dog park?
I'm here for something way more important than that. I'm helping the Dow's Lane 3rd graders get ready for life on Main Street by introducing them to important places and people. And as mayor, you more than qualify.
I'm flattered, but rather than bore your audience with what I do as mayor, how about we tell them about this rather unique building?
You took the words right out of my mouth. Not that life as a mayor is boring, but I do think your audience would like to know about this building.
Well, the town hall was opened in 1902. The deed for the building required that the building contain a free reading room, a library, the village offices, and a public hall. Have you heard of the Tiffany jewelry?
Sure, it's the expensive stuff that comes in the little blue boxes. Why do you ask?
Before there was Tiffany jewelry, there were Tiffany lamps. Louis Comfort Tiffany, whose dad lived in Irvington in the mid-1800s, became one of the most famous glassmakers in America. His work can also be seen in the Irvington Presbyterian Church, which has 106 of his stained glass windows. He said that the views of the Hudson River gave him inspiration as an artist. The name Tiffany has been famous ever since.
I'll think of him next time Mother's Day rolls around and I'm looking for a gift. Anything else you'd like to say about this building to our audience?
Sure. There's also a theater inside this building, which is a replica of the Ford Theater in Washington, D.C. Do you know why that theater is famous?
Not a clue, but perhaps one of the 3rd graders or one of their teachers knows the answer. I knew we could count on someone.
This balcony is just like the one that John Wilkes Booth jumped from after he assassinated President Abraham Lincoln with a pistol. When he landed on the stage, he broke his leg, but still managed to escape for several weeks before he was killed. The building is also home to some folks who do their best to keep things from getting out of hand in the village. Do you know who that might be?
That's right. The town hall is also home to the police department. I'm sure the 3rd graders have met a bunch of them in school. They'll also work with them when they take the DARE program at MSS. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would keep talking, but I know you're very busy with the town. Any final comments?
I really enjoyed our visit today, Hudson, and I look forward to welcoming your group of 3rd graders to be my neighbors next year. Our door is always open to Village Hall if you have questions, suggestions, or even the idea for a new location for a dog park. I'm going to leave you with a question. Earlier I said the original deed for Village Hall specified we had to have a reading room and a theater. If you remember what else we're supposed to have here, you'll know where you're headed next.
Whoever said 3rd graders don't know their stuff, that's ridiculous. You're right. It's the village library, which was moved from the town hall to the next building we're visiting.
Hi, Caitlin. What brings you here today?
We're making a film about everything the third graders need to know before coming over to Main Street, and we figured that they sure better know about the library. Could you please tell them a bit about this building and what you do?
I'd be happy to. How about I tell you a little of the history of the building, and then Ms. Gallagher, our children's librarian, can tell you about programs for third graders. The firm closed its Irvington greenhouse factory in 1988, and the building lay vacant.
Vacant? Doesn't that mean no one used the building?
Well done. You're exactly right. You have an impressive knowledge of vocabulary.
I'm sure that comes from all the time I've spent here. How did it become the town library?
The village bought the building in the 1990s, and then they renovated it into a new library, which was 3 times the size of the old library, and a wonderful mixture of new and old architecture.
Another classic case of using history to shape the present, right?
Spot on. Now let me introduce you to Ms. Gallagher, who runs our children's programs, and she can tell the third graders more about the wonderful things they can look forward to at the library when they move up to Main Street.
Hi, I'm Miss Gallagher, or Carolyn. We've probably seen many of you before, but we're looking forward to seeing you once you move to Main Street School. And for those of you who haven't been here before, we look forward to meeting you. We have all kinds of great things going on here, which you're sure to want to come check out. For example, we have a 4th and 5th grade book club, storytelling events, crafternoons, and Robert the Guitar Guy. We also have a Lego club and occasional movies and special events. Just last month we had Truck Day, where kids could climb all over Irvington fire trucks, the village ambulance, front loaders, sanitation trucks, and police cars. We encourage you to join us next fall, if not before.
You can see why Irvington has one of the best libraries in the area. It has great building, wonderful programs, and extremely helpful librarians. It also has something else. What do you suppose that might be? Okay, that was a hard one. But if you look out the front windows, you'll see it has not only a nice view of the railroad, but of the park on the other side. And that's where we're going next for the final stop on this tour.
Here are 2 of the village's real treasures, Scenic Hudson Park and Matheson Park, 2 of the finest parks on the Hudson River. And to tell you a little about them, we've brought in another treasure, Mr. Bob Connick, who has lived all his 90 years in Irvington. Hi, Mr. Connick. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hudson, I wouldn't have missed this for anything.
What can you tell us about these beautiful parks?
Today's waterfront can be thought of as 3 distinct areas. The northernmost section towards the Tappan Zee Bridge is Matheson Park. The middle section is Bridge Street Properties, a mixture of office and restaurants. And the southernmost section is Scenic Hudson Park.
So why is it your favorite place in Irvington?
Well, that's for many reasons. Its natural beauty, for one, its connection to the mighty Hudson River, which had a huge impact on how Irvington was settled and how it developed throughout history. And finally, for its connection to the people of Irvington. I'll bet many of you came here to use the playgrounds when you were little. Perhaps you still do that. You come here for school projects. Perhaps your family comes here for picnics or for the fireworks. And if you work hard in school, your high school graduation will take place in this park in 9 years.
Thank you, Mr. Connick. Irvington is lucky to have people such as yourself who have so much love for this village and who not only appreciate its history, but work hard to preserve it.
Oh, you're welcome, Hudson. And by the way, you got an awesome name. Welcome to Main Street School, as well as Main Street. All of you share in Irvington's rich history. I hope you learn it, cherish it, and join those of us who do work hard to preserve it.
Thanks again, Mr. Connick. It's not every day that I get to meet a living legend.
Okay, we're done with the tour now. But remember what we said about the quiz? Let's see how you do. Can you identify the following people?
Well done. You guys are clearly ready for 4th grade and life on Main Street. You've been a terrific audience, and we join everyone else in welcoming you to Main Street School. See you around the block.